Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of New Releases. Today, I'm so excited to have the wonderful Mirusia with us. Hi, Mirusia, thank you for joining us.
Hello.
It's so good to have you. We've kind of communicated somewhat throughout the years, but to actually speak is so lovely.
It is so nice. And I just want to say a quick thank you. Thanks for all you do for classical crossover music around the world. There's so many artists around the world now that perform classical crossover music. And it's so nice to have this little base where we all can come to celebrate each other's music. And it's really lovely. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. It's been so interesting. I don't know if you feel the same way, Marusha, but I remember growing up, like I always knew that it was somewhat different, but we didn't have that term really yet for it. So it's
Yeah.
nice now that we know what it is and we can sort of band together.
It's true. When I was growing up and I was doing these gigs and I was sort of singing this, I don't know, people were calling it popra at the time. And it was like, a mix of pop and opera. But it kind of was such a cliched way of saying it,
Yeah.
popra. Like it was almost cheapening it. And it's not, we are artists in our own right. We're not just opera, like
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more than that. And classical crossover, I think the actual term of that makes so much more sense because we don't just sing pop and opera together. There's so many other styles. And I mean, I guess my new album is the perfect example of that because it does cross over into multiple different genres, yet still having that sort of classical element to it.
Well, I think everyone kind of brings their own influences based on their childhood and what they went to school and did and everything. So I want to ask you a little bit about what you kind of see your sound being.
Okay, so I grew up in Brisbane in Australia, and well, I guess kind of on me was an influence of country music.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, it was kind of almost expected that I would become a country music singer because we had a country music club here in the Redlands area where I grew up. And there is a Redlands also in the USA, which is funny because sometimes I see them come past and I'm like, I didn't know we had that restaurant here in Redlands. And I'm like, oh no, it's in California.
Unfortunately
But
not.
oh, what a shame. But yeah, so I guess expected of me was to become this sort of country music artist or a pop artist. And I entered all the talent quests, the local talent quests around town. And I was singing with a band called the Wild Turkey Band and singing all the stuff like, the Dixie Chicks as they were known as back then.
Yep.
And all of that sort of, kind of Shania Twain and all of the stuff. And it just didn't really suit my voice. And so I had to really find where did my true voice shine.
Mm.
And I started singing more musical theatre stuff and some light classical, probably more what we refer to today as classical crossover.
Yep.
When I talk about Andrea Bocelli and Alessandro Safina, and of course, my big inspiration, Sarah Brightman. So started singing that style of music and going, this is amazing. And I feel so fantastic when I sing this music. So then miraculously, I was graduating from the Conservatorium of Music. And Andre Rieu called me and said, would you like to tour the world with me? And I guess I just fit exactly into that style. Andre does the classical crossover stuff, but he also does the traditional Viennese waltzes
Mm.
and the operetta pieces in his shows. So I guess that really suited my voice and who I am as an artist. And we were also able to experiment with crossover stuff in his shows. And I guess that's made me the artist I am today.
I love that. And I actually think it's funny because there are a few country songs now that have kind of been given that crossover treatment. And I actually think
Yeah.
it works well because the melodies and the story is so strong in country music
Oh,
that,
absolutely. Absolutely. The stories and the emotion behind it. I mean, that I just love country music. And I mean, as I said, it was expected of me to become a country musician or a singer. And I still love it. I still love the genre. I still listen to it all the time. In fact, just before I popped on the call with you, I was listening to one of my favorite artists of all time, Jewel, who's just released a new
mm,
album. And again, her album is a total crossover of styles. It starts kind of gospely almost. Then we're hitting some country stuff, and then there's almost some pop elements. She's a wonderful artist and absolutely one of the inspirations that I used to listen to.
well, so one of your songs, you have this new album named Songbird. And actually, it's been a busy couple of years for you because, yay, there it is. Not too long before that, you also did your live in concert, your album, and your DVD. So you've been
Yes.
keeping plenty busy.
Oh my goodness, yes. Okay, so COVID hits and I'm sort of forced off the road. I was literally on tour and the promoter calls and says, you got to go home. And I was like, 2 weeks, we'll be back on the road. Well,
No.
2 years later, I'm still recovering from
Yeah.
all of this stuff. And basically, I sat down for a while and took a well-earned break. I mean, I guess if you think about it, I've been touring nonstop since 2007.
Wow.
So by the time 2020 came along, I was like, nah, I kind of deserve a little bit of a break. So I thought, okay, I watch some shows on TV and do some things, as we all did. We all sort of try to deal with it in our own way. But I'm not a stagnant person. I can't
Mm.
just sort of sit around. And so I decided, well, let's work on the next project. So we started working on Songbird, the album. So that we started working on immediately, basically in 2020. So it's been 2 years in the making. And then in Queensland, the state that I live in, Australia, we had a lot of locked borders. So it was probably on the news where you are, because it was like worldwide news that Queensland
Yeah.
would like literally close their borders to international and domestic travel. We would have like one COVID case and borders would be shut down. It was that strict at that time. But because of that, we had no restrictions in place for going out to eat, for going to theatre and things like that. So as a performer living in Queensland, I was able to put on shows for full houses with no restrictions. People didn't even need to wear a mask because there was no COVID here.
Yeah.
So we filmed a live concert during this time. And for a lot of those people, it was probably the first time that they'd been out in about a year. And so it was really exciting to do that. And you actually hear and feel that in the vibe of when you listen to the CD or when you actually watch the DVD, you see it, you feel it. It's really exciting. So yeah, that was exciting. So we actually released that in June last year, and then Songbird we were still sort of working on. We wanted to perfect that, and so we released that this year. And I am just so thrilled, or trilled as the songbird would do, that this has been released after 2 years' time. And now, of course, we're working towards the next things. But the single of Jolene will be released this Friday. And we were talking about country music
Yes.
crossover. And Jolene is just the perfect example of that. I mean, what really would show off my sort of country wannabe roots is by doing a classical crossover country version, a
Yep.
CCC, if you will, of Dolly Parton's wonderful hit, Jolene. When we sat down at the piano to write the arrangement of this, because of course, when you do a classical crossover album, it's almost like we're very creative. We want to take a song and we want to keep it, true to its original form, but we want to make it different. So So that's what we did with Jolene. So we actually sat down at the piano and thought, okay, how can we make this different but samey so that we still have the same vibe? And we made it really dark and broody, and almost really brought out those jealousy feelings. Slowed it down just slightly, not like mega slow down, but we slowed it down just a little. And I wasn't sure about it. I said to my record label and to my producer, Michael, I said, are we sure about this song? I mean, it's a big risk, and are people going to like this? And they were all like, it's great, it's great. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It's just so different for me. And it's such, I guess the country aspect of it is such a personal part of who I am. And
Yeah.
not a lot of people don't know that I started out in country music. So I guess to perform it was and to record it was a big deal for me, but we did it and people love it, and so it's coming
That
out as a
sounds
single
great.
on Friday.
On Friday, so everyone will have to go and stream that. But tell us,
Yeah.
so I'm so curious of how people put albums together. Like for me, when I think about doing music, it's like a Pinterest board and pictures. So how do you start? Is it with a list of songs? Is it a concept, a theme?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this concept of this album Songbird is a retrospective on my career to date.
Mm.
So we basically just went through all the eras of Mirusia.
Hmm.
So, starting out in country music and then moving on to, the more, I guess I started singing in a jazz club.
Oh, really?
And I did that for a little while, but it didn't really suit my voice. And then I was snapped up by a production called Scotland the Brave, and we toured through Australia, New Zealand, United States, and Canada with this show. And so I put Amazing Grace on the record because I really thought it was important to really touch on that, because it was my first international tour. So
Mm.
while I was touring with Scotland the Brave, I was also touring with Andre Rieu. So that was all happening all at the same time. So there's some songs on there that I've sung with Andre, like Send in the Clowns. There is some songs that really show my classical side, because I really wanted to show, yes, I did the classical training at the conservatorium as well. So we've got Mozart's Laudate Dominum, which is a beautiful
Yeah.
sweeping melody from his Vespers. And there's also Gabriel Fauré's Pierre Jesu, which I love singing, and I sang it at the first funeral that I ever sang at.
Oh, really?
So, when you're starting out as an artist, you take every gig you can, and a lot of funerals and weddings came up that I sang at. I think it must be hilarious for these people who got married to look back at these pictures of their wedding day with this 17-year-old girl who's now, like in the record store.
Yeah. How cool for them, right?
That's pretty funny. But yeah, some of them sometimes reach out to me and say, oh my goodness, you sang at our wedding before you were famous. Which I think is hilarious. And they send me these photos and I look like this awkward teenager. But yeah, so Fauré's Pierre is on there, which is just gorgeous. And then of course, musical theatre stuff. And a wonderful artist in Australia, her name is Paulini. And she was in Australian Idol many years ago, but she made it big here in Australia. She's an amazing singer, but more so, she's a beautiful person.
Mm.
And she has Fijian heritage. She's just so gorgeous. And we got into studio and we recorded I Know Him So Well from Chess.
Yes.
And it is really fun because, gosh, our styles contrast. But that's classical crossover. I mean,
Yeah.
she is full on pop, like she's pop diva. Meanwhile, I'm, singing the operatic stuff.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious to get into studio and sing together and see the things that she could do with her voice that I just cannot do. And vice versa. I mean, that's hilarious. So we had fun with that. And then, of course, the Seekers. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of the group The Seekers. They're an Australian group that were very popular in the 60s, and they made it big time overseas, and their records charted at #1. They performed together with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
They were huge. And they were only around as a group for 4 years, and every so often, they would have their reunion. So 25th anniversary reunion, 50th, which was just a few years ago. And in 2019, I recorded an album called A Salute to the Seekers because of them. I mean, they really inspired me as a child with their songs. A lot of you will know their songs: Georgie Girl, I'll Never Find Another You, Morningtown Ride, The Carnival Is Over, all of those really popular melodies. And so in 2019, I actually toured together with the boys. Judith Durham was the female singer in the group, but no longer performs. So I actually went on tour with the boys, and it was
Awesome.
just such a full circle moment for me. I mean, how amazing. And so one of the songs on Songbird is, of course, a Seekers song written by Tom Springfield, I'll Never Find Another You, which I sing together with Michael Cristiano, who produced the album and is also one of the new members of the Seekers family. So yeah, there's so many special things in this album and the stories. I mean, if you read the booklet, I know a lot of us don't get physical albums anymore, but it's so great to read a booklet and to read what the songs are all about. So yeah, definitely all the stories are in the booklet.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I love going through a physical CD just because of space in New York. I don't get the many anymore, but I think if you can, it's a different experience just to be able to see the whole thing put together. And so I have a question for you. Just as a singer, obviously, when you go into the studio, it's a bit different. You could, if you didn't kind of have a producer, you could just keep recording, you know, because you have that opportunity. But what are some of the things you've learned over your time there? Like, you know, do you prefer a certain kind of mic, or just, you know, do you use reverb when you're listening back to yourself? Any little tips you've learned as you record?
I think one of the most important things to remember is a human voice is just that. It's a human voice.
Mm,
It's not going to be perfect all the time. And so there are going to be moments that you're singing a song and you've got a crackly line, or you've got something that just, you know, didn't quite work out in your opinion. But when others listen back, they go, far out, that's so emotional, the
mm,
way that sang that line. And you as yourself might think, oh, but it's not perfect.
yeah.
But I think that's the thing. It shouldn't be perfect, because then what's the point? I mean, that's not an emotional experience. So most of the tracks that I record, I try to do in one take, because that is the most
Amazing.
emotional experience that you
Yeah.
can achieve on a record. Send in the Clowns, the on this new record's Songbird, is completely one take wonder.
Wow.
We were trying to do it in studio and it just wasn't working out. And what we had done in that particular instance, we had the grand piano in the booth. So it's like it was like a quite a large booth where I would also run my vocals in. But I actually stood next to the sound engineer with a sort of a disc sort of thing around me,
Yeah.
just to put down a guide vocal so I could put my vocal down later. And so I could watch the pianist still through the booth, and we were playing the song together. And it just wasn't happening. I think he was
Mm.
hangry, so we went out for lunch. Um, and how dodgy, there was nothing open, so we went to Subway.
Okay.
Due to COVID, nothing was open. So we went to Subway, and as we call it in Australia, Subbers. And then we came back and we tried again. And that is the one take wonder that you
Mm.
hear on the record. I think food does wonders. But that was it. We just did it in one take. And we were like, should we
That's
do this
amazing.
again? And we did it a couple of times just to make sure. But that's the take we used in one take. So that's what you hear on the record. And that's what I love. Live in concert, the CD and DVD, again, it's live.
Yeah.
And stuff happens. You can't be perfect all the time. And that's what makes it so wonderful, because
Mm.
live music is just so wonderful. And a record, same thing. If you make a little thing, unless it's really disturbing to the ear, I love it. I love to be raw and a bit emotional. And it's definitely something I've learned over the years. I like to record with one ear on, one ear off of the headphone. I like to get up nice and close to the microphone so that I can really get those beautiful emotional feelings in there. And I think I definitely, when I'm in studio, I sing with my eyes closed a lot,
Mm.
just so I can imagine everything going on rather than me just standing in a box.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little harder to get into the feel when you don't have that audience and you're kind of in that little boxed in space, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, tell me, so you have Jolene coming out, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Are you going to do another single, or now are you going back on tour? What's coming next for you?
There's so much happening this year. It's kind of crazy. So Jolene comes out on Friday, and we've released 3 singles from the album. So that's the last single. And I'm really excited about it because the artwork is really stunning as well of the single. And you've already seen it. You've seen a sneak peek. So I'm excited about that. And I'm currently on a number of different tours. I'm touring with my friend Mark Vincent, who's another classical crossover singer here in Australia. He's from Sydney, and we're doing a tour at the moment
Awesome.
together, which is lovely. That wraps up in June. And then I have my annual Mother's Day concert at the Gold Coast, which is lovely. I love doing that. And now that I'm a mother myself, it's even more special. I've kind of started it without being a mom. And then as the years go on, my daughter Sasha, she makes an appearance on the stage, and
Aw.
the audience love it. It's like a yearly catch up, like, how are we going? You know,
Does
it's
she
great.
sing?
She loves singing. She's 4. She loves singing. She loves dancing. She's very funny. Like during sound checks, she's allowed to come on stage and sort of, you know, play. And then when we say, okay, time to leave the stage, and often, the crew needs to adjust lights and things. And she says, no, mum, sharing is caring. It's my turn. She's so funny.
Future performer there then.
I think so. But yeah, so then I've got the Songbird tour, which then, continues in May, and that will continue right through to October. I'm also traveling to the Netherlands. I've got a few postponed dates there to fulfill. So I've got some happening in June, and I've also got a whole Christmas tour, which is happening through the Netherlands in December, which is really exciting. And so many other little things. I'm even still finishing my Salute to the Seekers and Classics tour, which has been running since 2019. So we kind of were stopped in our tracks due to the bushfires here in Australia.
Oh, okay.
And then COVID hit. So it was like all of these dates. Some people have held onto these tickets for 8 postponements. I mean, that's just insane. So I'm finally wrapping that up in June as well. So yes, there's a lot happening. There's so much. And I'm just so thrilled to be back on the road again after all this time. It's definitely been an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of performers, and to show us how much we love singing and performing. And I'm definitely in my element when I'm on the stage.
So I have to ask you, you mentioned all those different tours. I'm sure you're rehearsing all of them. How can you remember all the lyrics? I feel like as I get older, it's so hard to remember lyrics.
Oh, yes. As you get older, it does. I'm so grateful that when I was a teenager that I sat in my room and just learned so many songs, because they've kind of gone into that long-term memory bank. Whereas when I need to learn things, I'm like, I'm definitely a visual learner. I have to write the lyrics down, and then that helps me remember them. So luckily I've still got it. But the thing that's tricky is when you're doing a few different shows and you're singing a song like Somewhere, for example, from West Side Story. I'm singing it in my Salute to the Seekers. I'm singing it with Mark. And I'm singing it in the Songbird tour. And each show has a different arrangement.
Oh.
So that's hard, because it's like, where do we start again? Is it do we start at the start, or do we start in the middle bit? Like, where do we go? So yeah, that can be really tricky. And it's definitely just about, making sure you rehearse it just before you go onto the stage, because otherwise you will have a mind blank.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I do have kind of 5 quick fun questions for you. Hopefully they're fun. So this is rapid round. Okay, let's see. So who and where was your first concert that you attended?
Les Miserables.
Really?
In the big top. We had it in a circus tent here in Brisbane, because we didn't have any performance venues at that time. They were just building our big performance venue. So they did it in a tent, and it was fantastic.
That's a really good first one. Okay. Do you prefer sweet or savory food?
Savory.
Savory. Okay. Do you have a favorite and a kind of least favorite song?
Oh,
that's a hard one, I know.
That's a terrible question to ask a singer. Oh my goodness.
It's like choosing your children.
I think, can I say pass?
Yeah, you can say pass. Okay, so the next one is, if you could live a moment in your life all over again, what would it be?
Oh, the birth of my baby girl. Yeah, that was such a beautiful day. Still brings tears to my eyes. Let's move on.
So the last one will be then, what app do you use most on your phone?
Oh my goodness. Oh, so many. And probably like Messenger chat, because I love chatting with people. As you can tell, I'm very talkative and chatty. Probably that, or lately I've been, looking a lot at TikTok videos, which I'm terrible at. I'm actually on TikTok and I'm bad. Like I've tried to do the click thing, like let's do a quick change, and people are like, really? Check it out. Let me know your feedback. I'm not that great at it.
Well, everyone, please go download the album, the single that's coming out. Mirusia, it has been such a privilege to speak to you. Thanks so much for coming on and doing this.
Thank you.
Jolene, 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 beauty is beyond compare, with flaming locks of auburn hair, with ivory skin and eyes of air.